We're here to take a pile of really challenging sources and, well, pull out the essential knowledge for you, giving you a shortcut to getting up to speed.
And today, we are diving into something ambitious. It's the promised land of modern tech, or at least that's the claim. We're talking about Web3.
Yeah, and our mission here is to really understand the sheer scale of this ambition. I mean, Web3 is promising a complete 180 on the internet we have now.
It's a revolution. That's the word they use. The goal is to fundamentally rewire the internet, to make it democratic, equitable, and finally, free from the grip of big tech.
That is a spectacular goal. But the sources we went through, including a deep strategic assessment and the reporting from Wired's Gilad Edelman, they suggest there's this huge gap, a canyon, really.
Right. Between the utopian vision, what Edelman so brilliantly called paradise, and the reality he saw on the ground.
The complex, messy, often chaotic reality he called the crypto arcade.
And that title, it just captures the central tension perfectly. This isn't just about code, it's an ideological puzzle.
So that's what we're getting into. The architecture, the politics, the culture of Web3. And we're trying to answer what feels like the essential question.
What happens structurally when you decide to rebuild society relying only on game theory, on immutable code, and, well, pure financial incentives? What could possibly go wrong?
Because we have to be clear up front. Web3 isn't something you can just go and use right now, not like Facebook or Google. It is an idea.
It's a concept, really. A blueprint for a decentralized internet built completely on the blockchain.
And we really need to dissect the architectural choices they made, especially around things like trust and governance, because those choices seem to be what ended up isolating this whole revolution into what looks a lot like a very speculative marketplace.
So to understand the Web3 solution, we first have to really get our heads around the Web 2.0 problem.
The problem that created the demand for a revolution in the first place.
Exactly. And you can pretty much track the internet's history in 3 big generations.
Okay, let's do it. Let's unpack that history, starting with, the screech of a dial-up modem.
That's it. Web 1.0, we're talking mostly the 90s. It was a static web.
I remember this. You'd go to a website and just read it?
You'd read it. Think early AOL, GeoCities, all those weird search portals, pets.com. It was totally passive. You, the user, were just a consumer of information that someone else put there.
And then around 2004, everything changes. The whole paradigm shifts.
Yeah.
And we get Web 2.0.
The web we're all living on right now.
The web as a platform.
Correct. Web 2.0 is all about interactivity. It's user-generated content.
Well, the choose it, eat 'em, blogs, Amazon reviews, YouTube, Wikipedia.
All of it. Suddenly, you're not just a consumer, you're the producer. And this created immense value, right? So much utility, so much connection. It was wildly successful for a reason.
But that success was kind of a Trojan horse, wasn't it? It led directly to the very things Web3 is now rebelling against.
Surveillance capitalism and centralization.
Right.
Precisely. Because we were all contributing the value, our data, our attention, our vacation photos, our opinions to platforms owned by centralized companies.
And those few companies, Meta, Google, Amazon, they just consolidated this unbelievable amount of power.
They became the gatekeepers. They control the data, they set the rules, and they take almost all the profit. The whole Web3 critique is that Web 2.0 started off feeling really democratic.
And ended up being a handful of monopolies running a massive surveillance machine.
That's the existential threat. That consolidation of power is what Web3 was designed to fight. But the solution didn't start with, a decentralized Twitter.
No, it started with something much more fundamental. Digital money without a bank.
You have to start with Bitcoin. It's the foundation for everything that came after. The core idea was, let's create a digital currency that's entirely peer-to-peer, one that doesn't need any central institution.
No Federal Reserve, no commercial bank, no government at all.
None of them. No one to enforce the rules or validate that you actually sent the money.
And Bitcoin pulled this off using incentives and game theory.
It was ingenious, really. The system was designed so that every single person involved, whether you're a user or a miner validating transactions, was economically motivated to keep the whole thing running, honestly.
Because trying to cheat would cost you more than you could possibly gain.
Exactly. The cost of cheating in terms of computing power and time just wasn't worth it. So the rules are transparent, they're immutable, and they're enforced by the code itself. And that was the first big successful demonstration of what they call trustlessness.
But Bitcoin was, it was limited. It was just a ledger for digital money. to turn that idea into a system that could run the whole internet, you needed more. You needed a platform.
And that's the leap that Ethereum made.
Right.
Ethereum came along shortly after Bitcoin, and its big breakthrough was adding a full programming language directly onto the blockchain, a Turing-complete language for the tech folks.
Which basically turned the blockchain from a simple static ledger into a generalized programmable computer.
You got it. It meant developers could now build complex logic, what we call decentralized applications or dApps, and these things called smart contracts, and run them directly on the chain.
So a smart contract is just code that runs itself.
It's just self-executing code. If a pre-agreed condition is met, say, two people agree on a price for something, the code automatically executes the deal. It transfers the assets or the data without needing a lawyer or a bank or any third party at all.
And that's the moment the whole Web3 concept actually became technologically possible.
Yes. And the person who kind of synthesized all this technology into an actual ideological movement, the person who coined the term Web3 or Web 3.0, was Gavin Wood.
One of the co-founders of Ethereum back around 2014. And from what the sources say, his motivation wasn't just about a technical upgrade. It was deeply political.
That political motivation is the absolute spiritual core of Web3. He coined the term in direct reaction to the Edward Snowden revelations.
Ah, okay. The ones that detail the massive government surveillance programs.
Right. So his goal wasn't just to make a faster website. It was to build an entire internet architecture that was explicitly, structurally resistant to government control, to corporate authority, to that kind of pervasive surveillance.
So the whole ambition from day one was digital sovereignty. A moral mission born out of a deep distrust of institutions.
That's the lens you have to view the whole movement through. The driving fear is that centralized powers, whether they're governments or corporations, will always, inevitably, abuse their control over our data and our communication.
And the solution is to just get rid of that centralized control entirely.
Which brings us back to that word that defines the whole architecture: trustlessness. It sounds so cynical to an outsider, doesn't it? How is a trustless world supposed to be a good thing?
Yeah, it sounds a bit paranoid.
And the term is a bit misleading. It doesn't mean we live in a world with no trust. It means you eliminate the need to put your blind faith in these powerful, centralized human entities.
So in Web 2.0, you just have to trust that Mark Zuckerberg or Tim Cook won't misuse your data.
You just have to trust them. And if they break that trust, your options are pretty limited.
Right.
Web3 aims to remove that human element of discretion where power gets concentrated. Instead of trusting a person or an institution, you are meant to trust the mathematical certainty and the total transparency of the code.
So you're replacing the potential for human corruption with the rigidity of math. But what happens when the math is wrong? Or when there's a bug in the code?
And that is the ultimate tension, isn't it? The mantra is code is law. The goal is to design a system where it's just functionally impossible or way too expensive for bad actors to do the wrong thing.
But that rigidity, that total elimination of human discretion.
It comes with some really profound and often unforeseen consequences when you try to apply it to messy, complex human systems.
This political foundation, it leads us to what feels like the most fascinating paradox of the whole movement. The sources frame it as a kind of horseshoe theory of Web3.
It's a great frame for it.
It seems to combine this radical libertarian streak with goals that sound, frankly, deeply progressive, utopian even.
It's a fundamental ideological paradox. The architectural means are pure libertarianism, a radical distrust of all institutions, this desire for a bottom-up, decentralized re-engineering of everything. A deep, deep reliance on market mechanics.
They want to tear down the system with technology alone.
Exactly. But then you look at the ends, the goals, and they're often framed in these very progressive terms. Solving climate change, ending world hunger, redistributing power and opportunity to everyone, fixing the massive inequalities that Web 2.0 created.
The sources called it a more progressive bench, trying to achieve lefty ends.
And that tension is profound.
Yeah.
The core question is, can you use strictly libertarian, trustless, market-driven tools, basically code and tokens, to achieve these really complex cooperative social outcomes?
Because most of those problems, like climate change or poverty, they require messy political compromise. They require collective action, flexible human governance.
Not just a rigid financial algorithm.
So the mechanism they use to try and bridge this gap, to make these decentralized platforms actually work, is tokenomics. How does a token fundamentally change the game for an internet platform?
Tokenomics is the whole system of incentives. It's designed to make sure that participating, contributing, keeping the platform sustainable, all of that is economically rewarded.
Okay, break that down.
So if you want to replace a Web 2.0 app, let's say you build a decentralized YouTube, you can't just rely on idealism to pay the server bills or attract developers. You need an economic engine.
And in the old system, the platform owner, Google, takes all the profit, and the people making the videos get very little in comparison.
Right. So in the Web3 version, when you build this new platform, you issue tokens. And these tokens are distributed to everyone who adds value, the people running the servers, the developers improving the client, and critically, the users creating the content.
So if I upload a great video to DecentraTube, I get a token that represents a tiny piece of ownership in the platform itself.
Exactly. That's the core incentive loop. You now have a financial stake ownership and voting power in the platform's success, so you're economically motivated to make it better.
Because if the platform grows and gets more users, the value of my tokens goes up.
Rewarding the earliest and most dedicated contributors, they're literally trying to code people into what they hope are socially beneficial interactions using these direct financial rewards.
It sounds like a kind of utopian financial democracy. And this brings us to the most radical organizational idea they have, decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs. We should probably spend some time here.
Yeah, the DAO is the key organizational vehicle for this whole vision. The most idealistic version is this concept of regenerative crypto economics, which suggests these clever incentive designs can solve huge societal problems by automatically directing money toward public goods. The DAO is how they plan to do it.
Okay, so just explain a DAO in simple mechanical terms. What is it?
Functionally, a DAO is just a club, or a cooperative, or a fund. Membership is based entirely on owning a specific crypto token for that organization.
So your token is your membership card.
And your voting ballot. The core mechanic is governance. Members vote on proposals, what to do with the organization's money, what projects to fund, and those votes are all recorded on the blockchain.
And the autonomous part.
That's the smart contract. If a vote passes, the smart contract, that immutable code, automatically executes the decision. It moves the crypto assets based on the outcome of the vote.
So there's no CEO who can ignore the vote, no board of directors needed to sign off on the wire transfer.
None. The system is trustless because the code executes the will of the token holders. It's transparent and censorship resistant.
The sources also critique this, right? They suggest the actual practical utility of a DAO is pretty narrow. They say it's basically a souped-up GoFundMe.
Well, that's a bit reductive, but it points to the core limitation. A blockchain can only really execute tasks that involve crypto assets. It can move money instantly, across borders with total transparency. That's a huge deal for fundraising and managing a treasury.
But it can't, say, negotiate a real-world legal contract or coordinate a team of volunteers to clean up a park.
Precisely. It's fantastic for frictionless, rapid asset transfer. It's terrible for the slow, nuanced, messy work of complex human coordination.
So in the real world, a lot of these DAOs end up looking like decentralized venture funds or really complex crowdfunding campaigns.
That's where they function best. Their unique advantage, in theory, is the potential to design those clever game theory incentives, the tokenomics, that can supposedly code people into socially beneficial interactions.
But this just brings us right back to that central structural failure. This whole vision is rooted in these big ideas like the network state communities using Web3 to go beyond national borders.
And that entire framework rests on one huge assumption, that market-driven governance is just better than political governance.
This is where the libertarian core seems to sabotage the progressive goals.
It does. To get trustlessness, you have to get rid of flexible human governance. You get rid of political compromise and discretion. And the second you remove those essential human tools,
The ones you need for complex social goals.
the system defaults to the only coordination mechanism it can reliably enforce. And that is market financialization.
You're saying because the code can only really enforce financial rules, everything becomes about money.
That is the core argument. The architecture is structurally biased to turn everything, concepts, data, social relationships, into a tradable financial asset. They call it assetization.
So if you get rid of trusting people, you have to enforce behavior with economic carrots and sticks.
And that structural bias means the system will always reward financial gain and rapid speculation over the slow, difficult, non-financial work of solving things like poverty or climate change. The medium is the message, and the message is money.
And that structural failure is exactly what Gillett Edelman's reporting captured so well. It led him to create his amazing metaphor.
He went to this huge Ethereum conference in Denver, maybe 10,000 people. And he realized that to understand Web3, you couldn't just look at the code. You had to understand the culture, the atmosphere.
He said he had to rip up his first draft because the purely technical description just missed the entire vibe. So what was it like? Was it this gathering of utopian architects rebuilding the world?
It was a bizarre mix, a jarring mix. On the one hand, you had the true believers. He called them the starry-eyed idealists, the utopians talking about these kumbaya goals for a transparent, equitable future. And they genuinely believe in it.
They're standing right next to who?
Right next to traders, promoters, people working for these higher-risk DeFi decentralized finance companies, many of which were probably collapsing at that very moment. It's a blend of like a cathedral and a casino.
So you've got both in one room.
Absolutely. You meet someone like Kevin Iwaki who embodies that paradise vision, a true philosopher of regenerative crypto economics, trying to use crypto to fund public goods and, as he puts it, lock human beings into a more cooperative society. Their mission is dead serious.
But that sincerity is constantly clashing with the reality of the metaphor. Paradise at the crypto arcade. Okay, let's break that down.
Right.
By the crypto arcade,
Yeah.
it feels so precise.
It is precise. Paradise is the dream, right? The post-Snowden vision realized a transparent, censorship-resistant infrastructure that gives power back to the people, digital sovereignty.
And the arcade is how it's actually playing out in the real world.
Right. Think about an arcade. It's a place of specialized, optional, and isolated play. You put in capital quarters, or in this case, tokens, for an immediate individual reward. It signifies a few major failures.
Okay, what's the first one?
First, isolation. The technical barrier to entry is just immense. Smart contracts, tokenomics, DAOs. You have to be totally immersed to even understand the rules of the game. If you're not in the arcade, you have no idea what's going on.
It stays niche. It runs parallel to the normal internet instead of replacing it.
Second, optionality. It's optional play. People are there because they choose to be, usually drawn in by the financial promise, not because it offers some kind of fundamentally better generalized utility than the Web 2.0 services they already use.
And third, the big one, speculation.
This is the core issue. Participants are spending capital for immediate individual reward. This lines up perfectly with the rapacious and trying to generate a fortune behavior that Edelman observed. The pursuit of wealth just completely overshadows the pursuit of utility.
So that drive towards assetization, turning every interaction into a tradable asset, is the engine of the arcade.
It is. The system rewards people who can create and trade these assets quickly, assets whose value is based on hype, not on any real-world utility.
The financial layer is just completely dominant.
And that dominance guarantees its isolation. I mean, think about it. If the technology was truly revolutionary in a useful way, everyone would be using it. Like, we all use Gmail or an iPhone, whether we own Google stock or not.
Which brings us to probably the most memorable anecdote from the sources. The broken toy list at the conference.
It's the perfect visceral metaphor for the whole paradox.
You have 10,000 people in a building, all discussing how they're going to re-engineer society, solve climate change, decentralize global power.
And the plumbing is overflowing. The basic fundamental utility in the building is broken, and no one seems organized enough to fix the immediate real-world problem right in front of them.
It's a symbol of that failure of generalized utility.
A huge one. The core blockchain technology is over 13 years old now. That's about how old the iPhone was just a few years back. And if the iPhone, after 13 years, couldn't reliably send a text, you wouldn't be saying, oh, give it time, it has so much promise.
Right, you'd say it's a failure.
Edelman notes that the tech often works really, really terribly. It's incredibly hard to use unless you're deep inside that specialized world.
And this difficulty means even the most idealistic projects, like this charitable DAO called Giveth, end up creating these super technical things that don't make sense outside of the context of Web3.
The ecosystem is totally self-referential. They spend their time solving internal Web3 problems, how to better fund a DAO, how to optimize a token exchange, instead of solving external pressing problems for the rest of society.
So the complexity and the isolation mean the revolution just never leaves the arcade. It never achieves the mass adoption it needs to even get close to paradise.
And maybe the most damning critique of all is that the architecture itself, The very thing designed to stop centralization is actually forcing the whole ecosystem to re-centralize.
The lack of utility and the technical difficulty are pushing everything back towards the middle.
It is. Let's go back to that old analogy. The dream in the 90s was everyone would run their own email server for total data freedom.
But in reality, everyone uses Gmail or Outlook. Convenience always wins over ideological purity.
And that same force is fatal to decentralization here. Running a full node, the hardware and software you need to talk directly to the blockchain, it's expensive, it's complex, it takes a lot of time. Most users, and even most Web3 apps, just can't do it.
So if a decentralized app needs to read data from the blockchain or send a transaction, it needs a middleman.
It needs help. So they rely on a few central companies to run the nodes for them, index all the data, and provide easy-to-use APIs, application programming interfaces that let the apps actually function.
And these companies become the new centralized bottlenecks. We should probably name them. Who are these new gatekeepers?
The sources point to a couple of infrastructure giants. You've got Alchemy and you've got Infura.
Yeah.
They're the service providers that most Web3 apps just plug into.
So Infura and Alchemy are running all the complicated machinery, and all these supposedly decentralized apps are relying on their APIs to
And talk to the blockchain. That's the structural contradiction. The entire point of the blockchain is this radical, trustless openness.
But if Alchemy decides to cut off an act, or if they have a big server outage,
Then huge parts of the decentralized internet just stop working because they can no longer see or talk to the blockchain.
so instead of trusting a big tech CEO, we're now just trusting the CEOs of Alchemy and Infura. The power structure hasn't disappeared, it's just shifted.
It shifted. They are, in effect, defining reality for a huge number of dApps. This re-centralization of infrastructure, born out of pure technical complexity, is a huge failure of that original post-Snowden vision.
And that failure is mirrored in the re-centralization of wealth and power within the governance system itself. I mean, despite all the talk of redistribution.
The sources show massive consolidation of power. The financialization bias pretty much guarantees it.
How so?
Well, wealth and governance power have concentrated incredibly quickly into the hands of a very small group. The platform founders, the big venture capital firms like Andreessen and Horowitz, and the whales, the earliest, biggest token holders.
The DAOs are supposed to be democratic, governed by anyone who holds a token. But if the tokens, which are the votes, are all held by a tiny group of people, the system isn't a democracy. It's an oligarchy.
Absolutely. The system is designed to reward early capital, which means economic power translates directly into political and governance power. The code might be trustless, but the structure is financially oligarchic.
And do we actually see this playing out in how DAOs work?
Oh, yeah. The evidence is overwhelming. DAOs have famously low voter participation. For most small token holders, it's just too complicated or not worth the effort.
Which means the big players, the whales, are the only ones voting.
The ones with the massive financial incentive to push through proposals that benefit their own holdings. The centralized influence is built right into the structure.
So the economic incentives just constantly steamroll the ideological goals. And this leads to that finding that so much of the activity in the space is, well, scammy or rapacious.
Because the structure creates an environment where quick money-making schemes, often with a thin layer of positive gloss, can thrive much more easily than slow, difficult, value-additive projects for the public good.
It comes back to that assetization mechanism.
It does. The architecture prioritizes turning concepts into tradable assets. So instead of a platform being designed to be useful for communication, it's designed first to create a tradable token out of that communication.
So the main metric of success isn't utility, it's the market value of the token.
Which rewards rapid speculation and arbitrage. Buy low, hype the project, sell high. It's not about the slow work of building something useful. The financial metrics are the only thing the code can reliably enforce, so that's what becomes important.
And this structural bias has drawn some really high-profile critics. Not just outsiders, but people like Jack Dorsey.
Both Elon Musk and Jack Dorsey have been very critical. Musk just called it a marketing buzzword. But Dorsey's critique was much more surgical.
What was his main point?
Dorsey basically called Web3 a venture capitalist's plaything. He argued that the revolution wasn't getting rid of centralized power, it was just shifting it from the old Web 2.0 giants, like Meta.
To the new powerful VC funds like A16Cs who invested billions in the early days?
Exactly. It's the same power structure, the same consolidation of wealth, just with a new set of financial players hiding behind this rhetoric of decentralization.
And that's not even getting into the broader critiques, right? The environmental concerns around proof of work, or the people who see the whole thing as a giant cryptocurrency bubble, or even a pyramid scheme. All that skepticism just reinforces this finding that the project is isolated, speculative, and structurally broken. So this structural flaw, this re-centralization problem, it forces us to look beyond just the technology and into politics. I mean, the centralization Web3 is fighting big tech's dominance. That's not just a technical problem, it's a political problem of consolidated markets.
And this seems to be the movement's biggest ideological blind spot. When Edelman was at that Denver conference, he noticed their attitude toward government wasn't, hardcore anti-government hostility, not like the early Bitcoin people.
It was more like they just dismissed it.
Exactly. Government was seen as kind of useless or just totally dysfunctional. The thinking goes, since Congress can't get its act together to do basic antitrust or enforce fair competition, technology seems like the only tool available.
This kind of technological fatalism leads them to just ignore the legal or regulatory solutions that could solve the very problem they're spending billions trying to engineer their way around.
And that's why their engagement with Washington, D.C. is purely defensive. They aren't lobbying for regulations that would help decentralization. They're just focused on stopping regulations like the SEC cracking down on tokens that might hurt their ability to raise capital.
They're protecting the arcade's financial engine, not the ideological outcome of paradise.
Right. And the counter-argument in the sources is so important. Regulation isn't always the enemy of innovation. Often, it's a powerful catalyst for it.
You can see that throughout history.
Oh, absolutely. Look at Tesla. Its success was hugely influenced by government intervention. Tax credits, subsidies for electric vehicles. The regulation didn't kill the technology. It created a market for it and accelerated its viability.
Or even something as simple as light bulbs. We all have these amazing, efficient LED bulbs now.
But that mass adoption only really happened after government mandates started phasing out the old, inefficient, incandescent bulbs.
The mandate created the market imperative for innovation.
It did. And the deep point here is, if Web3 technologies, the decentralized IDs, the better security, are truly superior, then the right kind of regulations could actually spur their adoption.
So, by making the centralized competitors less viable.
Exactly. Imagine strong antitrust enforcement that actually breaks up the big tech giants. Or, more subtly, mandatory data portability laws. Laws that force companies to let you easily take your data and move it to a competitor.
That would instantly make decentralized alternatives much more attractive.
It would create a competitive ecosystem overnight. The competition they're trying to build with code needs to be enforced by policy.
So it's a question of priorities. The movement put all its energy into building a new system from scratch, only to find out that markets always consolidate without a referee. They just ignore the political fight.
And that neglect brings us to the harsh reality of the crypto market meltdown. The movement's dependence on that speculative capital can't be overstated.
So what's the feeling inside the arcade now after so much of that capital has just vanished?
There's a lot of talk about resiliency. We'll ride this out. They see the downturn as cyclical, just tracking the NASDAQ. But the reality is the project needs a constant flow of capital to pay programmers and fund these idealistic projects.
If the money that was invested in purely speculative tokens evaporates, the whole project is in trouble, no matter how good the code is. The arcade needs quarters to keep the lights on.
And that financial precarity is why the most robust strategic conclusion from all this is the need for a radical, pragmatic separation.
Strategic decoupling.
Yes, decoupling the underlying cryptographic utility from the full public blockchain architecture and its crazy, volatile financial layer.
This feels like the real path to getting something useful out of all this. Separate the tools from the revolution.
Edelman notes, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do with the cryptography element without having to put stuff on the blockchain and get tangled up in the token economy.
So we have to disentangle the politics and the speculation from the actual tech advancements.
Right. The real value is in the principles of distributed security and minimizing trust, not necessarily in token-governed DAOs.
So what are the practical things that offer real value right now without having to buy into the whole crypto arcade?
You focus on the advancements in security and privacy protocols, specifically things like decentralized identity solutions, D-Days, or verifiable credentials.
Ways for you to prove who you are without relying on Google or the government to hold your data.
Exactly. Sophisticated alternatives to passwords and identity management that use cryptographic proof. For businesses, the goal shifts completely. You move away from chasing paradise and toward achieving concrete utilitarian gains.
Things like operational resilience, distributed security, robust redundancy.
That value exists right now. It can be integrated into existing systems today, whether the world ever adopts DAOs or not. It's the path that allows the core technological ideas to survive the collapse of the speculative market.
This has been an incredibly thorough deep dive. I mean, if we had to synthesize the core lesson here, it seems to be that Web3 is this hugely ambitious project that tried to solve a political problem monopoly power using purely technological and financial tools.
And while the intention of so many people involved is genuinely progressive, genuinely anti-big tech, the architecture they chose based on trustlessness and code is law, it just created this structural bias toward financialization.
A bias that constantly undermines its own ideals. It inevitably pushes the revolution into that specialized, speculative crypto arcade.
The moment you eliminate human discretion, political compromise, that trustless mandate means market financialization becomes the system's only reliable way to coordinate people. The rigid logic of the machine just takes over from the messy logic of humanity.
So what's the final tangible takeaway for you, the listener?
I think it's that the most enduring value from this whole chaotic, expensive ideological movement might not be a new token-governed society. It might be the acceleration of these powerful underlying cryptographic tools, the decentralized identifiers, the better security protocols, things we can adopt without buying a ticket to the arcade.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought. We know from the history of the web that markets tend to consolidate unless they're regulated by political human systems. So if Web3 structural bias inevitably leads back to financialization and centralization recreating the very power dynamics it wanted to destroy, then is its failure less about the technology itself and more about its fundamental refusal to engage with the very human and political mechanisms like regulation and law that are necessary to enforce the competitive fairness it claims to want?
It feels like the ultimate lesson. Technology can't solve a problem born from human politics without, engaging in politics itself.